They glittered, endless, perfect, indifferent. Inside the ceramic glass of Port Meridian, the largest diplomatic hub in the Orion Arm. To most, it was a place of unity, of progress, of species once divided by light years, now sharing breath, trade, and culture. To Maura Vance, it was a museum of rejection. She stood alone at the edge of the concourse of bonds, where luminous banners displayed the joining ceremonies of 100 civilizations. Elegant, bioluminescent beings intertwined tendrils in slow dances. Crystalline entities harmonized in resonant chords of commitment. Even the insectoid Celt, who once reproduced purely through genetic auctions, now celebrated pair bonding rituals after centuries of cultural evolution. Everyone, it seemed, had found a way to connect. Everyone except humans, and especially Mara, subject human female. Status non-compatible. The phrase had followed her across systems like a shadow. She had tried, God, she had tried. On Aurelian, the gas giant dwellers found her structurally incoherent, disturbed by her rigid skeleton and an inability to redistribute mass. On Thrace, the empathic ocean species recoiled from her emotional noise, unable to decipher the chaotic storm of human feeling. The elegant Virilians admired her symmetry, but dismissed her as temporally unstable, aging too quickly, loving too briefly, dying too soon. Each rejection had been polite, clinical, devastating. You experience attachment in irrational bursts. One Virilian had told her, its voice like chimes in vacuum, is inefficient. Mara had laughed then. Later, she cried until her throat burned. Now at 32 standard years old, she had become something of a curiosity. The human who kept trying. A relic of stubbornness. A case study in incompatibility. She leaned against the glass, watching a distant convoy slip into hyperspace. Leaving. Always leaving. What's wrong with me? She whispered. Nothing. The voice came from behind her. Human male. Mara stiffened. She turned slowly. He stood out immediately, not because he was human, but because he looked like he didn't belong anywhere. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face marked by old scars and eyes that burned with something dangerously close to defiance. You shouldn't sneak up on people, she said. You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answered, he replied. She frowned. And what makes you think I don't? He stepped closer, hands in the pockets of a worn flight jacket. Because if you really believed something was wrong with you, you'd have stopped trying. Mara crossed her arms. I have stopped. Standing here says otherwise. Silence stretched between them. Who are you? She asked. Jonah Hale. He said, independent contractor, occasional smuggler, professional mistake. Despite herself, she almost smiled. Let me guess, she said. You've come to tell me humans should stick with their own kind. I've heard that speech. Jonah shook his head. No, I've come to tell you the galaxy's wrong. She blinked. That's a bold claim. It's a correct one. He stepped beside her, looking out at the stars. They say humans are too emotional, he continued. Too short-lived, too messy. But what they really mean is we don't fit their systems. We don't optimize. We don't conform. He turned to her. We choose. Mara felt something tighten in her chest. I chose to leave Earth, she said quietly. I chose to believe we could belong out here. They punished you for it. No, she said, sharper than she intended. They just didn't choose me back. And Jonah studied her for a long moment. Then he said, I do. The words hit harder than any rejection ever had. Don't, she said immediately. Don't say that like it's simple. It is simple. It's not. Her voice cracked. You don't know what it's like to be analyzed, dissected, dismissed by entire civilizations, to be told you're fundamentally incompatible with connection. I know exactly what that's like. He cut in, calm but firm. She froze. He exhaled slowly. I've been to the same worlds, Mara, got the same evaluations. Human male excessive risk tolerance, unstable bonding patterns, aggressive protective instincts. He gave a humorless chuckle. Apparently, I'm statistically likely to disrupt societal equilibrium. Mara stared at him. So what? She said. You just decided it didn't matter. No, Jonah said. I decided they don't get to define what matters. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I've been watching you. That's not reassuring. He smirked faintly. But hear me out. She hesitated, then nodded. Theve rejected you because you don't fit their models, he said. Because you love too fiercely, think too unpredictably, feel too deeply. He met her eyes. Because you're human. A strange warmth flickered in her chest. Fragile, dangerous. And that's supposed to be a good thing, she asked. It's the best thing, he said. It means you're capable of something they're not, which is choosing someone even when it doesn't make sense. Silence. The station hummed around them, oblivious. Mara swallowed. Why are you telling me this? Jonah's expression hardened slightly. Because I'm about to do something very stupid, he said. And I need to know if you're as incompatible as they say. Her pulse quickened. Define stupid. He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. I'm going to challenge the conquered. Her blood ran cold. The conquered, the ruling coalition of the most powerful alien civilizations, didn't just govern trade and diplomacy. They enforced biological and cultural compatibility laws. Cross-species pairings required approval. Unauthorized bonds were considered destabilizing, illegal, dangerous, sometimes punishable by exile. You can't be serious, she said. I am. Why? Because their system is broken, Jana said. And the only way to prove it is to break it publicly. Mara shook her head. You're talking about starting an interspecies incident. I'm talking about making them confront a truth they've been avoiding. And what truth is that? He held her gaze. That compatibility isn't something you measure. A long, heavy pause. Mara Vance, he said quietly, I'm proposing a registered bond, human to human, filed directly against Concord Doctrine. Her breath caught. That's not illegal, she said weakly. No, Jonah said. But the reason behind it is. She frowned. They've been using humans as a control group, he explained. A baseline for incompatibility studies. We're the example of what doesn't work. A realization dawned slowly. You want to prove them wrong, she said. I want to show them that what they call flaws are actually strengths. And you think what? That if two incompatible humans choose each other, it'll shake the system. I think, Jana said, it'll force them to admit they've been looking at connection the wrong way. Mara's heart pounded. This could get us blacklisted, she said. Exile worse. I know, and you're willing to risk that? U.S. for what? He didn't hesitate. For you. The words hung between them. Heavy, undeniable. Mara felt the weight of every rejection, every cold analysis, every quiet dismissal pressing down on her. And beneath it, something else. Hope, terrifying, fragile, real. You don't even know me, she whispered. Jonah smiled. Soft, certain. I know enough. Which is that you didn't stop trying. Tears burned in her eyes. The stars outside seem closer now, brighter, warmer. This is insane, she said. Absolutely, they'll fight it. Let them. They could destroy us. Then Jonah shrugged. Then we'll be the most dangerous, incompatible variables they've ever seen. A shaky laugh escaped her. She looked at him. Really? Look at the Scarts. The unwavering certainty, at someone who saw her not as a problem to solve, but as a choice to make. Mara took a slow breath, then another, and finally, okay, she said. Jonah blinked. Okay, she repeated, steadier now, let's break the galaxy. The announcement hit the Concorde like a supernova. Two humans, declaring a bond not for necessity, not for survival, but for choice. The hearings were immediate. Accusations flew, instability, recklessness, cultural contamination. You are undermining centuries of interspecies harmony, one counselor declared. Jonah stood tall. No, he said. We're reminding you what harmony actually means. Mara stepped forward, her voice cleared despite the weight of 1,000 alien gazes. You measure compatibility by similarity, she said, by efficiency, by predictability. She shook her head. That's not connection. That's control. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. We're different, she continued. Messy, emotional, short-lived. She reached for Jonah's hand. And we choose anyway. A silence fell. The absolute. For the first time, the conqueror had no immediate answer. Because what stood before them wasn't a flaw. It was a challenge. And it was undeniable. Months later, the stars didn't feel so cold. Not because the galaxy had changed overnight. It hadn't. But because something had shifted. A question had been planted, a doubt in the system. And across distant worlds, whispers began. What if connection isn't about being the same? What if it's about choosing despite the differences? On the edge of Port Meridian, Mara stood once more by the glass. But this time she wasn't alone. Jonah's hand found hers easily, naturally human. You ever regret it? She asked. He squeezed her hand gently. Not for a second, as she smiled watching a new convoy depart. This one carrying delegates, researchers, dreamers. Change was slow, but it was coming, turns out. She said softly, weren't incompatible. Jonah glanced at her, a hint of a grin tugging at his lips. No, he said, we were just ahead of the curve. Mara Vance had crossed more stars than most species could name, yet nowhere in the vast intergalactic lattice did she feel less seen than in the presence of others. The galaxy was loud with life. It shimmered with civilizations that evolved beyond war, beyond scarcity, beyond the primitive loneliness humans still carried in their bones. The A3 floated through shared consciousness, never alone, even in silence. The Kaler braided their lives together in triads and clusters, their bonds calculated with mathematical precision. Even the enigmatic Sith navigated existence in perfect emotional symmetry, never loving too much, never losing too deeply. And then there was Mara, singular, unpaired, undefined. She had arrived at Port Meridian with the stubborn optimism of her species, believing difference would be curiosity, not condemnation. Humans, after all, were adaptable. They learned languages in days, mimicked customs with uncanny speed, and embraced the unknown with reckless sincerity. Mara thought that would be enough. It wasn't. At first, the rejections were polite. The Kaler envoy had studied her genetic volatility and concluded she would destabilize any triad formation. The A3 had gently withdrawn after attempting to synchronize with her mind, overwhelmed by the chaotic intensity of her thoughts. The Sith had been the keenest of all. They admired her passion, they said, but found it unsustainable. But each encounter chipped something away. It wasn't just that she was alone. It was that she had been measured, analyzed, and deemed fundamentally incompatible with connection itself. Not unworthy, just wrong. Over time, Mara stopped initiating conversations. She stopped attending bonding assemblies. She watched from the edges instead, where light from bioluminescent beings cast shifting colors across her skin, making her feel even more like something unfinished. There were other humans on the station, of course, traders, engineers, diplomats. But even among them, Mara felt out of place. Many had accepted the quiet truth that humans existed on the fringe of galactic intimacy. They built careers, not relationships. They adapted by lowering expectations. Mara couldn't. She still believed in something irrational, that connection wasn't meant to be engineered or optimized, that it was messy, unpredictable, sometimes painful, but real in a way no algorithm could replicate. The galaxy disagreed. One evening, as she stood before the vast observation glass, watching ships slip into hyperspace, Mara wondered if the others were right, if perhaps humanity's greatest strength, its emotional depth, was also its fatal flaw. You look like you're trying to outstare infinity, a voice said behind her. She turned, surprised to hear her own language spoken without translation delay. The man who approached didn't carry himself like the diplomats or researchers she was used to. There was something unpolished about him, something grounded. His clothes were worn, his posture relaxed, his eyes sharp in a way that suggested he noticed things others ignored. Just thinking, Mara replied. Dangerous habit out here, he said with a faint smile. Nimim's Elias Rourke, Mara. He joined her at the glass, folding his arms as he looked out at the stars. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You've been here a while, he said eventually. Long enough. And still alone. Oh, it wasn't a question. Mara stiffened slightly. That obvious to someone paying attention. Yeah. She exhaled a mix of irritation and relief. Let me guess. You're going to tell me to stop trying, that humans aren't built for whatever this is. Elias shook his head. No, I think we're the only ones who are. She frowned, studying him. That's a bold claim. Not really. Look at them, he said, gesturing subtly toward the bustling concourse behind them. Every species here has turned connection into a system. Rules, metrics, compatibility thresholds. They've optimized the life out of it. We haven't. He met her gaze. We can't. It's not in us. Mara felt something shift, though she couldn't name it yet. Tell that to the dozen species that rejected me. I would, Elias said calmly, but they wouldn't understand the argument. And you do. I think so. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. You weren't rejected because you're incapable of connection. You were rejected because you refused to reduce it to something convenient. The words struck deeper than she expected. I just wanted to belong, she said quietly. Maybe that's the problem, he replied. You're trying to belong in a system that doesn't deserve what you offer. Mara let that sit. It felt both comforting and unsettling. Easy for you to say, she murmured. You don't know what it's like to be told over and over that you're fundamentally incompatible. Elias's expression softened, but there was steel beneath it. I do know. I've heard the same verdict. She blinked, and I decided their definition of compatible was too small. A faint, disbelieving laugh escaped her. So what? You just ignore it? No, he said. I challenge it. How? He turned fully toward her now, his gaze steady. By choosing anyway. The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. Choosing what? You, he said. The word hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. Mara searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for the clinical detachment she had grown used to. She found none. That's not how this works, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. It is for us. You don't even know me. I know enough, Elias replied. I know you're still here, still hoping, still refusing to accept that connection has to be sterile to be valid. Her heart pounded, a chaotic rhythm no alien had ever been able to interpret. This could go wrong, she whispered. Of course it could, he said. That's the point. Mara looked back at the stars. For the first time in a long while, they didn't feel like witnesses to her isolation. They felt like possibilities again, dangerous, uncertain, alive. All those civilizations, she said slowly. None of them saw anything worth choosing. Elias's voice was quiet but unwavering. Then they weren't looking hard enough. She turned to him, something fragile but fierce rising within her. Humans are messy, she said. Short-sighted, irrational, blah, absolutely. She held his gaze. And you think that's stronger. Elias smiled faintly. I think it's real. Mara took a breath, the kind that felt like stepping off an edge. Then she reached for his hand. In a galaxy that had perfected connection into something safe and predictable, two flawed, uncertain humans stood together and chose something else entirely. Not because it was efficient, not because it was approved, but because in a universe that measured everything, they were willing to embrace what couldn't be measured at all. And for the first time, Mara didn't feel incompatible. She felt human. Mara Vance learned the language of rejection in 100 different forms, and none of them sounded cruel. That was the worst part. No one laughed at her. No one mocked her. The galaxy was far too evolved for something so primitive. Instead, they studied her with quiet fascination, ran their scans, exchanged soft-tuned conclusions, and then declined her with a politeness so absolute it left no room for anger, only emptiness. On Alira Station, a Kaler male had circled her slowly, his multifaceted eyes flickering as he processed her biology. Your emotional variance exceeds acceptable thresholds, he explained gently. Bond instability probability, 87%. He inclined his head in something like respect. You are remarkable, but not suitable. Not suitable. On the ocean world of Thuris, She had submerged herself in the warm, glowing tides to meet a being who communicated through shared feeling. For a moment, just a moment, she thought it might work. She opened herself, let her emotions rise unfiltered to hope, curiosity, the fragile bloom of connection. The Thracian recoiled instantly. Too loud, it whispered into her mind, its presence fracturing away. Your inner state is chaotic. There is no harmony to join. But Mara surfaced alone, the alien waters suddenly cold. On Viro, where beauty and symmetry governed all social bonds, she came closest to success. A Varelian male studied her for days, tracing the proportions of her face, the cadence of her voice, the rhythm of her thoughts. He seemed intrigued, drawn even. You are aesthetically compelling, he admitted. Her heart had lifted at that. Then came the rest. But your lifespan renders long-term pairing inefficient. Your attachments would form quickly and dissolve within a negligible time frame. The emotional cost would outweigh the experiential gain. Inefficient. That word lingered longer than the others. Everywhere she went, the pattern repeated. Different species, different criteria, same conclusion. Humans were anomalies, bundles of contradiction in a galaxy that had long since optimized itself beyond contradiction. They felt too much, too fast. They changed too quickly. They clung to individuality in a universe that had learned to merge, to balance, to stabilize. Mara tried to adapt. She practiced emotional restraint, smoothing her reactions into something more palatable. She studied alien customs, mimicked their stillness, their measured responses. She learned when to speak, when to pause, when to suppress the instinct to reach out. It didn't work. Because the problem wasn't what she did, it was what she was. You seek connection as if it is discovery. One Sith male told her, his voice perfectly even. For us, it is alignment. Two states becoming one stable system. You do not align. You fluctuate. I can learn, Mara insisted, though even she could hear the strain in her voice. You can imitate, he corrected, but you cannot sustain. After that, she stopped arguing. Back on Port Meridian, she became a ghost in crowded spaces. She watched bonds form around her, elegant, seamless, inevitable. There was no hesitation in them, no risk. Compatibility had already been calculated, confirmed, guaranteed. Love, if it could even be called that, was certainty. Mara wondered what that felt like, not the certainty, but the absence of doubt. She carried too much doubt now. It followed her into quiet corridors and empty quarters, whispering questions she couldn't escape. What if they were right? What if humans weren't meant for this? What if everything she felt, every surge of hope, every ache of longing, was just a biological misfire in a universe that had moved past such things? One night, unable to sleep, she found herself standing at the edge of the station's observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before her, distant and unreachable. They're not judging you, the voice startled her. She turned to see a human man leaning against the far wall, half shadowed, as if he'd been there the entire time. I didn't say they were, Mara replied. You didn't have to. He stepped forward, revealing a face marked by wear, but not defeat. His eyes were sharp, alive in a way she hadn't seen in a long time. Elias Rourke, he said. Mara. He nodded as if he'd expected that. You've been making the rounds. She tensed. Excuse me. Illyra, Thrace, Viro, he listed. Word gets around. Human-female seeking cross-species bond. Consistently rejected. There was no malice in his tone. That almost made it worse. Glad to know I'm a case study, she muttered. More like a question no one's answered yet. Mara folded her arms. There is no question. I'm incompatible. That's the answer. Elias tilted his head slightly. Zit. Or is that just the answer that's easiest for them? She frowned, caught off guard. They don't reject you because you lack something. He continued. That they reject you because you have something they can't process. Unpredictability. Intensity. Choice. Mara shook her head. That's just another way of saying I'm flawed. No, Elias said quietly. It's another way of saying you're human. Silence settled between them. I've heard all this before, she said eventually. Humans are different. Humans are special. It doesn't change the outcome. Maybe the outcome's wrong. She looked at him, really looked this time. There was no pity in his expression, no detached curiosity, just a steady certainty that felt dangerous. You don't know what it's like, she said softly, to try over and over and never be enough. Elias met her gaze without hesitation. I do. I just came to a different conclusion. And what's that? That enough isn't something they get to define. Amara felt something stir. Small, fragile, but persistent. Easy to say, she whispered. Hard to live, he agreed, but worth it. He stepped closer, not invading her space, but close enough that she could see the fine lines of exhaustion and resilience etched into his face. You're not alone because you're unworthy, he said. You're alone because you've been looking for connection in a system that eliminated everything that makes connection real. Her throat tightened, and what makes it real? Elias' expression softened just slightly. Risk, he said. Choice. The possibility of failure. Amara let out a shaky breath. That sounds terrifying. Is the thin, why would anyone choose it? He held her gaze. Because it means something. The stars beyond the glass seem different somehow. Not closer, not warmer, but no longer indifferent. For the first time in a long while, Mara felt the weight of rejection shift, not disappear, but change like a question being rewritten instead of answered. Every species out there turned me away, she said quietly. Elias nodded. Yeah, and you're saying they're all wrong. A faint smile touched his lip. I'm saying they stopped asking the right questions. Amara looked back at the endless dark, then at the man beside her. For so long, she had believed her differences were barriers, proof that she didn't belong. Now, for the first time, she wondered if they were something else entirely. Not a flaw, not a failure, but a kind of strength no one else in the galaxy had learned how to see.